everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sue Desjardins, and on behalf of the Board of Governors and the staff of the American Independence Museum, it is my great honor to welcome you to the 25th Annual American Independence Festival. The festival is a huge undertaking for the American Independence Museum and directly supports our mission and our goals. The American Independence Museum's mission is to raise awareness, educate, and celebrate the achievement of our nation's independence. And we endeavor to inspire civic engagement today because back in 1776, without the engagement and commitment of a small group of dedicated citizens, people who sacrificed their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, American independence might not have been possible. Today we celebrate our freedoms. We appreciate and are grateful for the sacrifices that secured our liberty. And we recognize the importance of continuing to exercise these freedoms today. Today you will see history come alive. The planning of the American Independence Festival consumed an entire year. And I would like to take a moment to thank those individuals who gave their time and their talents to make this year's event, the 25th Annual Festival, so special. So a heartfelt thank you to the Festival Committee, the volunteers and guides, our graduate and undergraduate interns, the museum staff, members of the Society of the Cincinnati, and our dedicated Board of Governors, our members and our donors, and the town of Exeter, and our local area businesses and the community. Without all of these individuals and organizations, there would not be a festival. So thank you. In that vein, it's important to highlight some of the local businesses, companies, and individuals who, by their generous donations and support, have enabled us to present such a spectacular festival. Our sponsors provide the funds that afford us the opportunity to have reenactors, interpreters, artisans, musicians that make this day so rich and so meaningful. So I want to recognize our sponsors. Declaration sponsors, Convenient MD, GEICO, the local office, the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts, Seacoast Media Group, and the William W. Treat Foundation. Canon sponsors with Chinburg Properties, Red Hook Brewery, Ruffner Real Estate. The militia sponsors, Access Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, Buxton Oil Company, ECM Design, Exeter Hospital, Jeffrey M. Brackett PC, Historic Motorsports, People's United Bank, Southport Printing, and the Adams sponsors, the Exeter Inn and Epic Restaurant, Pintuck and Pearl, and Unitil. Please join me in thanking all of them. We appreciate all the support we have received from the town of Exeter and urge you to continue to support the museum and invest in our future as we invest in keeping the past alive. If you're not a member, become one today. And now it's my great honor to introduce fellow board member and chair of the town select board, Chairwoman Kate Gilman.
Wait!
Thank you and welcome to Exeter. We're very proud to have this 25th celebration. We like to see the crowds that come out and support the museum. We're very happy that it's turned into not so rainy day. The town of Exeter was very important during the start of the Revolution. When you come in and see, you'll see at the tavern and the museum itself where the discussions were happening and where the plans were being made and how they were being done, the roots of the Revolution. And so with that, I'm going to keep it very short and say thank you very much for coming and tell your friends to come next year. Thank you.
Hello, good people of Exeter.
Oh, they're coming back.
It's a grand and glorious day. My name is Jim Hayden, and I am lucky enough to be a board member here at the museum. we want to take you back in time to a moment about 139 years ago. I want you to think about what life was like then. And that's one of the things we're trying to do today, is to show all sides of what life was like.
Order your pilots!
139 years ago, the battles of Lexington, Concord, and Bunker Hill were more than a year past.
Last pen!
The British have now left Boston, although they're here today with us. Now the fighting has moved to New York. The interesting thing is, we're still all British subjects, even though we're at war. The colonists are divided. Some want to break away from King George III. Some remain loyal to His Majesty. And others are yet undecided in what to do. But prior to July of 1776, one enormous problem remains for those wanting to break away. There is no clear path, no document explaining the reasons for revolt, no decisive action as to why we are fighting with the British and what we want out of it. That is until July 4th, 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was voted by Congress and a universal statement of our fight against the king is at hand.
Make way, make way!
But whose hand is it? It was in Philadelphia that the document was printed. Many copies were made, and they have been making their way to various cities and towns across the colonies to inform the citizens of this new united front. 2 weeks after it is adopted, the document arrives in Philadelphia, and I believe it has just arrived.
Good morning, Exeter. We've just received an important dispatch from the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. I'd like to read it for you now. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect for the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the cause which impelled them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide guards for their future security. Such has been the patient suffering of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former system of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from within and convulsions without. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to their laws for establishing judicial powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for their tenure in their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us, in many cases, of the benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and by waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, dissolution, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas, to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince, whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant, is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. And we have conjured them, by the ties of our common kindred, to disavow these usurpations, which have inevitably interrupted our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of a right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may have right to, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
You just heard from Exeter's own John Taylor Gilman, a resident of the Lad Gilman house behind me and just 22 years old at the time of the Declaration's reading. Imagine what it took for him to stand up on that fateful day to deliver the first news of America's declaring independence against King George III. Pretty amazing. It was an act of treason to even read that in public. And yet, a 22-year-old stood up and did that. But on this day in July, the war is not yet won. It has only begun. It will last for another 7 years until the Treaty of Paris is signed and ratified. It will take years and much sacrifice by the colonists before our new country is established. After we attain our independence, and after many years of the formation of our new government, our nation's first president visited the town of Exeter. He made a stop at our own Folsom Tavern, which was not at that location at that time, on November 4th, 1798, to thank individuals for their support in the founding of our new nation. Now, the day he arrived, he was supposed to come that evening for a planned ball. He arrived that morning. There was no ball that morning. There was a very hastily put together luncheon. He was fed. The arrival ceremony that was planned for him that evening ended up being a ceremony as he exited the town that afternoon. But nonetheless, the president did make his appearance here and did say a few words, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe we have that very fine welcoming committee arriving now. Perhaps we could encourage the General to say a few words to us.
Citizens of New Hampshire, I remember those days well. So much has transpired since our former days under British rule, since John Taylor Gilman read our declaration. As I look upon this fair town, I am reminded that it was not so long ago when it had to be determined whether Americans would be free men or slaves, whether they were to have their own property to call their own, whether their houses and farms would be pillaged and destroyed, and themselves consigned to a state of wretchedness from which no human efforts would deliver them. I see among you faces of children who are too young to know that their fate and those of unborn millions depended on the courage and conduct of this army. Our cruel and unrelenting enemy left us the only choice of brave resistance or the most abject submission. We therefore resolved to conquer or die. Nothing short of independence could possibly do. A peace under any other terms would have been, if I may allow the expression, a peace of war. The injuries we received from the British nation were so unprovoked and had been so great and so many that they will never be forgotten. For were we to easily accede to terms of dependence, no nation upon future occasions, let the oppressions of Britain be so just and unjust and flagrant, would interpose for our relief, or at best, they would do so with a cautious reluctance, and upon conditions most probably that would have been hard, if not dishonorable to us. France, by her supplies, had saved us from the yoke thus far, and a wise and virtuous perseverance would free us entirely. And so we took to war, as harsh as any that had come before. Following our heroic war for independence, we strove to form a more perfect union, ever vigilant of danger that in all times may be posed by a tyrannical rule. Government is not reason. It is not eloquence. It is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and fearful master. To secure our freedoms, we set to work to create a new constitution to protect our new won liberties. We must still work together for the common good and stand together to protect our rights. If freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent may we be led like sheep to the slaughter. If our right to bear arms is taken away, then we lose our ability to defend those same freedoms. Indeed, it may be laid down as a primary position and the basis of our system that every citizen who enjoys the protection of a free government owes his personal services to the defense of it, and consequently, that the citizens of America, with a few legal and official exceptions, from 18 to 50 years of age, be born on the militia rolls, provided with uniform arms, and so far accustomed to the use of them that the total strength of the country might be called forth on short notice for any very interesting emergency. It was also recommended to the proposed Constitution that it be provided with more checks and barriers against the introduction of tyranny than any government hitherto instituted among mortals hath possessed. Let the reins of government then be braced and held with a steady hand, and every violation of the Constitution be reprehended. If defective, let it be amended, but not suffering to be trampled upon whilst it has an existence.
Keep this up. South Carolina.
I do regret, my fellow citizens, that I must now depart your fine company, as duty calls me to continue my journey. But I want to thank you for your kind and most gracious attention and hospitality to this humble servant.
The Gilman family was pivotal for Revolutionary War times in New Hampshire. Exeter really served as the Revolutionary War capital at the time during the Revolution, and the eldest person who lived here, Nicholas Gilman Sr., was made the state treasurer after the royal governor was ousted. So right here in Exeter, this house, 1721, was potentially known as the state treasury at one time during the Revolution. His children were also very prominent and made a huge impact on the founding of our nation, and we like to talk about them because Nicholas Gilman Jr., he was a member of the Constitutional Convention, but mostly a lot of people in town here in Exeter know of John Taylor Gilman, who was the eldest son, who read the Declaration of Independence aloud to all the townspeople of Exeter, July 16, 1776. So the thing to note is actually on July 4th, we don't really know what happened here at the Lad Gilman house. We know the Gilman family lived here and they were prominent and they were doing some great work towards the start of independence for our new country. But on July 4th, you know, there was no email, there was no CNN.com, so there was no word yet that the Declaration of Independence had been written and voted on by Congress. So it wasn't until a few weeks later, on July 16th, that we received word here, and it was John Taylor Gilman who was the one who stood in front of the crowds of individuals to read the Declaration aloud. And that is why we host our Independence Festival a few weeks after the 4th.
our unit when we were first created in the 1600s. This is actually a slow-lit fuse that we would pull out to light a grenade.
So then you'd have an apron. This is a well-used apron. And you kind of put it underneath. Yeah, if you're going to eat, I put mine over my gown. This is called a short gown. Most women wore 2 petticoats. It would give you fullness. The stay that you would wear would give you like a conical shape, kind of like a barrel, but it would push up your bosoms to show your moons. Moons were okay, elbows not so much.
Elbows are illegal.
Most of the time we'd be working around the fire, so you'd wear a cap to keep the smoke out of your hair, the smell of the smoke.
Wood smoke smells rockin' though.
Yeah, but you know what? If you're sweating and around the fire all the time, it's not so much.
Yeah, that's true. You got me there.
So your shirts were really, really long because you'd wear them to bed. Women would wear,
I'll see you.
I'll be the one sitting right here.
mine's pink because I washed it with something that bled. But women would wear a
I like
shift
being
and
the
we would wear
objective.
this to bed. So this is your bed
I object to
clothes
the
as
objective.
well as your undergarments.
Try to get some order on everything.
Because
They're all about wearing lots of clothes and sweating.
I take offense.
TBH.
It's TBH.
Flag that you're carrying.
It's a gentleman's coat.
That's coming. That'll come.
Let's say Robert Paul is now working up at Waterville Valley. Just hoping to put together a timeline event.
Yeah, and then there's lots of buttons.
So you put out a thing just saying, I just wanted to let you know we're working on this event, put together. And
Buttons everywhere.
huge. All the
And gentlemen would have wore a pair of breeches.
No
And
Confederate.
socks that came up
Everything's
underneath
bad.
breeches.
Flag is
And you would have worn
bad.
garters to keep your
Everything's
socks
bad.
up. So we wore
CSS
layers
bad.
and layers of clothes. Not only underneath, but his coat would have been a waistcoat.